This is the generation of them that seek his face. This is the generation of them that seek his face.
Shabbat Shalom. We want to welcome each and every one of you here today, especially those of you that are coming in through our YouTube Torah Unleashed channel. Please subscribe to our channel so that we could unleash Torah to each and every one of you and be able to bring to what we learn to those around us. Because every one of us teachers, we definitely cannot reach the whole world. But we could reach you. And you could reach those around you. And those you teach could reach others. And little by little, the world is exposed to Torah. And the Torah is unleashed to the whole world. Today, we want to welcome you to Olive Tree and our Torah Unleashed teaching. We are going to continue part 5 today of our Sefer Shmot, the book of Exodus for 2022. And we are up to Parashah 17, Yitro. And which Yitro is Jethro in English, and Exodus 18:1 through 20:23. And again, we want to welcome each and every one of you. There are 8 sub-parashot to Parashah Yitro. There are 8 subheadings. Today we're going to talk about the meaning of Yitro and Moses. We're going to be talking about the appointment of judges and how the appointment of judges is not just for the Mosaic, but it's also for the Messianic and Apostolic body of Messiah. And we're going to look up at the Israelites and their arrival in Sinai. Today, Israel arrives in Sinai. And of course, Yahweh promises a covenant. The covenant is prepared. And then there's a theophany. A theophany is an apparition at Sinai. And of course, the Decalogue. The word Decalogue means the 10 words, which is what the 10 commandments are. They're actually 10 words or 10 phrases. And then the last one is the law concerning the altar. So this is the teaching. This is the raw materials of the parasha today. And of course, we could only give raw materials. We cannot get those raw materials and fix them up for you. And it would take, each one of these would take a study by itself. And so the first one, let's come here to Exodus, and where we have the meeting of Yitro with Moses. Now, Yitro heard of the Exodus. Watch what it says. And we read this in the Torah scrolls and in Hebrew. And so let's look at it in English. Yitro, or Jethro, priest of Midian, Cohen Midian, Choten Moshe, father-in-law to Moses. The Hebrew word father-in-law is in Hebrew Choten. Choten Moshe is the father-in-law of Moses. He heard. In fact, in Hebrew, in the Hebrew scroll, in the parasha, it actually begins, Vayishma Yitro. And he heard Shema. You see, Shema. Vayishma. And Yitro heard all that Adonai had done for Moses and for Israel, his people. How Yahweh had brought Israel out of Egypt, out of Mitzrayim. So Yitro Hoten Moshe, the father-in-law of Moses, Hoten Moshe, brought Moses with Zephora. He brought Moses' wife, and he brought his 2 sons, and the 2 sons, of course, were named Gershom, and Eleazar. And so he brings Zephora remember Zephora had come, and then she went back to Midian, and then now he brings her back with him. And then they have a meeting. They came and they met together here in verse 12. Then Yitro, Hoten Moshe, offered a holocaust and sacrifices to Elohim. What's interesting is that Yitro was a believer, but it seems that he still had misgivings. But what he says is, now I know. Yitro rejoiced at all of what Yahweh had done. Now I know. And he says, blessed be Yahweh, who has rescued you, who has Yeshuatenu, who has delivered you, who has taken you out of the hands of the Egyptians and has rescued the people from their grasp. Now I know that Yahweh is greater than all the gods. Even at this time, and again, there was a general knowledge of Yahweh, but some of these people had, again, he was a Kohen Midian, he was a priest, he was a chieftain and a priest, a Kohen, because he was the first of his family, firstborn, as they had that tradition back then. And they had many times many gods. And there was gods of this mountain and gods of that river. But now I know. His eyes were opened. When Adonai does mighty works, our eyes are open. The eyes of those around, whether they be unbelievers or they be halfway believers. There's no such thing as a halfway believer, but he was like a halfway believer. Now I know. In fact, sometimes we even say, now we know for sure. We've come to that point. Maybe we grew up in a Christian or Jewish home. We grew up and then our parents or grandparents, they might have been believers, but we were kind of like what they call, have you heard that saying, God ain't got no grandchildren. He only has children. But there's a lot of people that grow up as God's grandchildren. And they might have been around, they hear things, but then something happens. And their eyes are open. Now we know, and they give themselves. In fact, many times I ask my prayer for when somebody says, pray for my son, pray for my daughter. They're here and they're there. And I pray, Father, open their eyes. Let them see that they could say, now I know for sure. And my parents knew, I knew because they knew, but now I know. It's a personal thing. It's a personal encounter. And over here, Yitro has this personal encounter with Yahweh. Now he knows that with outstretched arm, with a mighty hand, Yahweh delivered Moshe, his son-in-law, and Kol Israel, all the people of Israel. And then look what happened to the Egyptians. Look how Israel was rescued, redeemed, delivered by power. The power of Yahweh. Not by tactics, not by armies. Adonai opened up the Red Sea. He did mighty works all along. And what a mighty Elohim we have. And then they have a fellowship meal. What's interesting is that here in verse 12, it says they had these sacrifices with Moshe and Aaron and all the elders of Israel, and they shared the meal. The meal. This is a setting for what we would later on, even in the time of Messiah, when Yeshua takes the cup, he takes bread, even when all this idea, what happens at a sacrifice, now they did Holocaust sacrifices, and the Holocaust is a complete burning to ashes. When you have a Holocaust sacrifice, the whole animal is reduced to ashes. But when you have a communion sacrifice, now remember, this is before Adonai even gave in Leviticus all the sacrifices. When we get to Leviticus chapter 1, and so we'll learn about those sacrifices. But this is before. This right there tells us that the sacrificial system was not instituted by Moses and not part of what Adonai would bring salvation into the world. The sacrificial system, if you remember, really started with Adam and Eve and Adonai. I've mentioned this many times. Adonai doing the first sacrifice, or Adonai sacrificed a lamb, following the pattern that he's the same yesterday, today, and forever, sacrificed a lamb. And with the skins of the animal, he covered the guilt and shame of Adam and Eve. Innocent blood was shed. Abel brings a sacrifice that Adonai finds acceptable. Blood. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, they all sacrifice. And over here, there's communion sacrifice. And the communion sacrifice is not a Holocaust where it's reduced to ashes. In the communion sacrifice, the animal is sacrificed, but the meat is shared among the participants. And when the meat is shared among the participants, then those who are participating not only share the meat, but they share with one another. And this is a chavurah, this is a fellowship. This is a small little group of people making a covenant. And when they poured salt on it, in fact, we've talked about that, the salt covenant means the endurance. And so they have this communion sacrifice, and they have the meal. Now this meal, like Pesach, and what occurs at Pesach, those who eat of the Pesach are in cahoots with the Pesach, and in cahoots with that. Here they were in cahoots with one another. And Yitro and Aaron and the elders of Israel have this meal, and they eat together, and they form this fellowship. A communion sacrifice could also be called a fellowship sacrifice, where you eat together of the contents. And of course, going further into the Messianic and the Apostolic, when we partake of the bread and wine at Pesach, at Passover, and have that communion sacrifice, Paul in Corinthians says, the bread that we break, it is a communion with the body of Messiah. The cup that we drink, it is a communion with the blood of Messiah. And so when we partake of Pesach, and we are there in the table and eating, and the Seder goes on, the order of service 1.2.3, and we talk about the Haggadah, we are in cahoots with one another. We are in agreement with one another. And when we partake of the third part of the Passover meal, the afikomen, and the third cup, the cup of redemption, as we partake of those, we are in cahoots with one another, but we're also in cahoots with Yeshua and what he did for us. We are in communion with his body and in communion with his blood. And in a sense, this is a foretaste of that fellowship meal. Now, if we go to verse 13, on the following day, Moshe took his seat to administer justice. So one of the things that Moshe was, he was not just the deliverer of Israel, but Adonai had put him in the forefront, and because he was in the forefront, then what happens when someone is the leader? When someone is the leader up here, then you have people underneath, and they have problems with one another. So what is the normal thing that happens? Well, you fight it out among yourselves, but sometimes people say, well, let's have somebody mediate. Let's have someone be the mediator. And in a sense, Moshe also became a judge. He was one of the first judges that we see in Scripture. And he took his seat to administer justice. This will become known as the seat of Moses. And it's not just like a judge, but it's more like a teacher, like an instructor, instructing how it should be done, how it should not be done. So it's not so much like, here comes the judge with the gavel. It is something a little bit different, as we'll see. For the people, administer justice for the people, and from morning till evening. Can you imagine every day as they traveled? They traveled in stages, and then they set up camp. And then sometimes they were there 1 or 2 days, sometimes a week. And every time that they settled down, from morning to evening. We're talking here a 12-hour day in a sense, and depending on the season. They stood around him, observing what labors he took to himself for the people's sake. The Choten Moshe, the father-in-law of Moses, said to him, "Why do you take all of this on yourself? For the people, why sit here alone with the people standing around from morning to evening?" And Moses answered, "Because the people come to me to bring their inquiries to Elohim." Remember, it's not just a judge, it's inquiries. He's a mediator. He's acting as a mediator. He's actually acting as a priest, a mediator. And so they would bring inquiries about what would Adonai says. Also, when they have some dispute, they come to me, and I settle the difference between them and the other, and instruct them. Here's the teaching part. And instruct them in the statutes and his decisions. So in the Mishpatim and Chukim, remember, we saw that on the way here, Adonai had given them Mishpatim and Chukim, statutes and judgments and laws, protocols. And by the way, from the beginning to Adam, Adonai has been instructing us. In fact, in the cool of the day, Adonai would come and instruct Adam and speak with Adam until the day when he ate of the fruit, and Adonai had to say, "Adam, where are you?" And he was hiding. And Adonai instructed him. That's why Adam could pass on to Cain and Abel about sacrifice, about giving to Adonai. That's how Abraham and Isaac, they knew the statutes. In fact, we are told that Abraham was a Torah keeper. He followed the instruction of Adonai. He followed the way of Yahweh. We know that Abraham was a Torah keeper, and he followed Torah. This is before, remember, this is before Moses. This is before the giving of the covenant of the 10 words. This is before what people call the law. The law came through Moses. Well, wait a second. Adonai gave Torah through Moses, but statutes and laws and judgments and decisions had already started by Adonai through Adam, through Seth, through Abraham. And even on the way here, Adonai, remember, he says there, he gave him statute, mishpatim and hukim. And then Yitro says to him, you cannot do this yourself. You're going to tire and you're going to end up, with what we would call today stress. You're going to get stressed out, which actually happens. Do you know that I understand that this in 2021, about 10,000 pastors resigned. 10,000 pastors resigned. And this is from the Gallup poll. And so many churches closed down. 2021 had more congregations closed down and more pastors resigning. And a lot of that has to do with the stress of the ministry. And the pastor must know that he, of all people, must depend on who? We must depend on Adonai. Not depend on the denominations or our bishops or anything else, but depend on Adonai. The work is too heavy for you. You cannot do it alone. Take my advice. So his choten, his father-in-law, gives him advice. Not a command, but gives him advice. Look at this, my son-in-law. And he says, Elohim will be with you. You ought to represent the people before Elohim and bring their disputes to him. But teach them the statutes and the mishpatim hukim. Show them the way they must follow and what course they must be. But choose from the people at large capable and Elohim-fearing men, trustworthy, incorruptible, and appoint them, ordain them to be leaders of the people. And so, yes, Moses is called to be a teacher. We call him Moshe, our teacher. He is our teacher. But he taught the people this way. The responsibility that we have is to teach the people, but not to do everything for them. See, that's why I say I want to give you raw materials, but it's not my responsibility to fix the dinner plate for you, but to give you the raw materials so that you could fix the dinner plate yourself. And so they are to get these men that would be leaders, and of course, depending on the tribes and the leaders of thousands and hundreds and fifties and tens, and kind of like a system that goes up, like what we have. In fact, we have judges, appellate judges, and our final judges of the Supreme Court, which needs a lot of our prayer today. Because I don't know why all these things should never have been politicized. Everything is political nowadays. And so pray for our Supreme Court that they forget politics, forget what side and who might pay them more, whatever, and that they might get to the business of bringing constitutional government back to America, because I believe constitutional government has been stolen from us by all these agendas. And so that's what they do. He commanded it, and they set up what would later become a Beit Din, and of course later on called the Sanhedrin. The appointment of judges here is the origin of the Mosaic Beit Din. But one of the things that I want to pass on to especially those that are out there, you've heard me talk about this many times, but I want to pass out that when we study Scripture, we study it in what we call a Hebraic perspective. And the true Hebraic perspective has three parts to it: the Mosaic, the Messianic, and the Apostolic. You cannot study Scripture in a balanced way until you study it mosaically, messianically, and apostolically. So let's take this idea of the appointment of judges, which a lot of people say, well, that's Old Testament. Well, that was for Israel back then. Oh, that's for the Jews. No, that's the word of Elohim for all time. How is it for all time? We don't have judges. We don't have all this problem, all these things that they're doing. Oh, yes, we do. People need to be taught. People need to be encouraged. Disputes need to be settled. The word Beit Din is the house of judgment. It's like what we would call a court system, a tribunal. And every congregation should have a Beit Din. We have a Beit Din. Does your congregation have a Beit Din? What is a Beit Din? It's a group of elders who judge what's going on in the congregation. And you say, well, wait a second, that's Old Testament. No, it's not. It's Messianic. It's apostolic. Show me. My grandson, Leor, when I say something, he always tells me, show me. Show me. Show me. He's always saying, show me. Well, let me show you. Yeshua in the Messianic Beit Din, Matthew 18:15-20. If your brother does something wrong, go and have it out with him alone between your two selves. If he listens to you, you have won back your brother. Case closed. Se acabó. It's over with. If there is a dispute or a situation, you did that to me, or whatever the dispute is, do not tell anybody about it. It's none of their business. If someone hurts you, do not tell anybody about it. Tell the person who hurt you. That's the word of Yeshua. If your brother does something wrong, go and have it out with him alone. Between your two selves. If he listens, you've won back your brother. You don't go there to judge him. You go to win him back. You don't go there to beat him up. When it says, have it out between your two selves, doesn't mean that you go to the back of the thing and duke it out. I'm not talking about duking it out. We're talking about, let's talk about it. And you tell him, brother, you hurt me, you did this. If he listens to you, you've won back your brother. The key of judgment is always winning back your brother. The key of discipline is winning back that one that has strayed. If he does not listen, if he listens, it's over with. Again, you don't tell people, oh, that guy, oh, that what she did. And no. Gossip should end in the first one. Have it out with him alone. What most people do is when you have a problem, oh, so-and-so did this to me. And all of a sudden it spreads and it spreads and it spreads. But if he does not listen, take one or two others along with you. Whatever the misdemeanor, demeanor, right? The evidence of 2 or 3 witnesses is required to sustain the charge. So now you go to 2 or 3 brothers and you tell them, you know what? So-and-so did this. I went to him, like Yeshua said, and he just told me to go fly a kite. Let's go. And so the 2 or 3 go with you, and you talk to him. If he refuses to, now if he listens, you've won back your brother. Case closed. Again, you and the witnesses, no more. You have witnesses, but no more. You don't need to deal with this situation no more. It's over with. But if he refuses to listen to these, report it to the community, report it to the kehilah, report it to the body. And if he refuses to listen to the community, then treat him like a Gentile or a tax collector. Now, a Gentile is an unbeliever. A tax collector is someone who was part of Israel and now has turned coat to, in this case, the Romans, and was working for them, which you never talked to tax collectors. When they collected your taxes, you paid the tax, but you never fellowshipped with them. You didn't fellowship with tax collectors in the first century. Of course, Yeshua goes to Matthew the tax collector and wins them to himself. And Yeshua ministered to tax collectors many times. But if he refuses to listen to the body, and we're talking about like us, we would have to go to the brother, and he didn't listen to you personally. So you took 2 or 3 witnesses, maybe one of the elders, one of the deacons, and he didn't listen to you guys. Then we report it to you all, and I would say, you know what? We've had this situation with brother so-and-so, and he did this damage to this brother. It wasn't, he told him to go fly a kite. We took witnesses so that we could solve the situation. He told even the witnesses to go fly a kite. Now we bring it to you. And so you all talk to him. So 2 or 3 of you or more could go talk to him, whatever. If he tells you guys to go fly a kite, then he's out. He's a goner. People call this excommunication. A lot of people don't like that word. Some people have been excommunicated for the right reason. Of course, some people have been excommunicated for the wrong reasons, and that's another matter. But here is a person who is supposed to be excommunicated after 1 has failed, after step 2 has failed, after step 3 has failed, then he is to be excommunicated. Excommunicated means not to communicate with him no more. And technically, when someone's been excommunicated, you don't communicate with that person no more. Now, watch what it says. In truth, I tell you, whatever you, and again, this is you all in the in Texan and in the Greek, whatever you all as a body bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loosen on earth will be loosened in heaven. In truth, I tell you once again, if 2 of you on earth agree to ask anything at all, it will be granted to you by my Father in heaven. For where 2 or 3 meet in my name, I am there among them. Now, sometimes we use this, people use this in prayer. I bind you, Satan. I loosen you. Well, technically, that's not what it's about. That verse has nothing to do with binding Satan or binding this person or that person. This verse has to do with binding in excommunication a brother that has refused to listen, that has done damage, and has refused to repent, refused to cooperate, refused to do anything. And again, sometimes we use this word for prayer, but it talks about the responsibility that especially we elders have to help a brother. And that's the Messianic Beit Din. Yeshua told us to do this. This is Yeshua. Now, before and after this, there's so much. Please go to Matthew 18, and you'll find so much that we can work on today. But now we have Paul and the Apostolic Beit Din. Now, in chapter 5, we have a situation where a brother was coming to the congregation, sitting about the second row right there. He was sitting in the second row in the first century, and he was living in immorality. In fact, he was so gross that this brother was having immoral relations with his stepmom. A case which Paul says is not even heard among the Gentiles. And Paul says to, again, kick him out, excommunicate him. In fact, Paul says, hand him over to Satan for the destruction of the flesh. He says, don't hand him over to Adonai. You know, can we hand my son over to Adonai so Adonai could? No, that's not what Paul says. It says hand him over to Satan. We're talking about a believer that his soul might be saved. We're not talking about losing his salvation or excommunication. You don't lose your salvation. You lose your fellowship. And again, a lot of people use excommunication. Well, he's lost now. No, he's not lost. No, he's not lost. Now, he could become an apostate and be lost. But as long as he still believes, he might, Can you imagine we have many believers right now that might be listening to us that are still believers? You still believe in Yeshua. In fact, you believe that the moment you die, you're going to go to be with Adonai, which you will. But you're living in sin. You're living, maybe you did something or something happened and you left the congregation, your congregation. And your pastor and maybe the people have come for you or sometimes you excommunicated yourself. And you're what we would call backslidden. One of the things is that we need to know that you're not lost. If you die in your sin, you won't lose your salvation, but you'll lose reward. And that's a whole other teaching. And so that brother was told that they should excommunicate him. But over here, the next chapter, is one of you with a complaint against another, so brazen as to seek judgment from sinners and not from Elohim's holy people? Do you not realize that the holy people of Elohim are to be the judges of the world? And that if the world is to be judged by you, are you not competent for petty cases? Do you not realize that we shall be judges of angels, and quite certainly over matters of this life? But when you have matters of this life to be judged, you bring them before those who are of no account in the church. I say this to make you ashamed of yourself. Can it really be that it is impossible to find in the community one sensible person? Moses said, get people that are sensible, people that are trustworthy of deciding questions between brothers. And that is why brother goes to law against brother, and that before unbelievers. Here in 1 Corinthians 6, we have the makings of what we call the Messianic Apostolic Beit Din. Not only do we follow the Mosaic Beit Din, but we follow it in a Messianic and Apostolic way. And of course, these are just 2 verses. There's many verses that we could go to And that's a whole study in itself. But now we arrive at Sinai. And let's go to chapter 19. Chapter 19. And chapter 19 actually begins a section of Exodus, the main section of Exodus, where we call it the section of the Sinai covenant. 3 months after they came out of the land of Egypt, on that day, the sons of Israel came to the wilderness of Sinai. So, in the Hebrew, it says 3 months after they left Egypt to the day. So what we're thinking is 3 months is 90 days. And I'm going to bring this out later on when, at the end, when I ask the question, was the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, given at Shavuot? Given at Shavuot, because today, the idea that Shavuot is the celebration of the giving of Torah. Now, I am in disagreement with that because Shavuot is 50 days after. 50 days after. And again, Shavuot is when we get into the land. So it wasn't something that was practiced. In fact, the giving of the Torah has no anniversary. Biblically, there is no anniversary for the giving of the Torah. Rabbinical Judaism today celebrates the anniversary of the giving of the Torah on Shavuot. But again, I myself, I'm not in agreement with that. And they arrive at Sinai, but watch what it says there. 3 months after. Now, if it was on the 3rd month, not 3 complete months to the day, which would be 90 days, but on the 3rd month, then we're still looking at 60 days. 60 days, 2 months. On the 3rd month, begin 3rd month, that's 60 days. But again, the 50 days does not fit in to this verse. On that day, the sons of Israel came to the wilderness of Sinai. From Rephaim, they set out again, and when they reached the wilderness of Sinai, there in the wilderness, they pitched camp there facing the mountain. Israel pitched camp. Now, where is Sinai? We have, like we had the crossing of the Sea of Reeds controversy last week, we have what we call the Great Sinai controversy. Where is the real Sinai? The real Sinai depends on the real sea crossing. Where did they cross the sea? Where is Sinai? I don't know. And nobody else does either. Now, there's all kinds of books. There's all kinds of videos. There's all kinds of people. And by the way, none of these are actually archaeologists or people that have spent time there. It's usually different, well, I guess we would call them explorers or things like that. But we have all kinds of pictures and stuff like that. But there's always missing geographical and archaeological evidence to say beyond a shadow of a doubt where they occurred. Now, one of the things that we must always do is not just come up with an assumption and teach the assumption without evidence. Providence is the most important thing that we need, and we need the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. Now, in a lot of these things, there's a lot of pictures, but we don't know who took the pictures. We don't know where the pictures were taken. They've said, we've taken these pictures in the Red Sea. We've taken these pictures in Saudi Arabia. But some of these places, whether it's the controversy of Noah's Ark, the controversy of the Ark of the Covenant. I touched the Ark of the Covenant, one person said. I saw it. I looked through this hole and I saw it. Or where did the sea crossing happen? Where is Sinai? Where is the split rock? None of these can be verified. Yeah, they tell me, oh, I verified it. I've been there. Okay, show me, take me. Well, we can't because of the government, because of this, and that. Well, again, until we are able to have evidence beyond the shadow of a doubt, then I will have to say, I don't know. I think it might be here. I think it might be there, people could say. But they shouldn't say, we found the real Sinai, or we found the real crossing, we found the real Ark of the Covenant, we found the real Noah's Ark. And it's interesting that one person, who again is not an archaeologist, is one of the ones that has found all these things, whereas archaeologists and historians have been searching the whole world and haven't found them. People have just stumbled upon them and have been there. So until, for all intents and purposes, to be honest with archaeology and history and geography, I have to say, I don't know. So if I do find out, I'll definitely let you know. But at this point, let's stop it here. The Israelites come to Sinai. Of course, it's on the 3rd month. And it does say they're on the 3rd month. Moses goes up, Moses goes down, Moses goes up, Moses goes down, Moses goes up, Moses goes down. Now, if you see the ruggedness of all the Sinais, by the way, there are 3 places that are typically looked upon as Sinai. And all of them are very rough places to be going up and down. And so when it comes to, him, verse 3, it says, Moses then went up to Elohim, and Yahweh called him from the mountain. Say this to the sons of Jacob, to the house of Jacob. Declare this to the sons of Israel. You yourselves have seen what I did with the Egyptians, how I carried you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. From this you know that now, if you obey my voice and hold fast to my covenant, you of all nations, shall be my very own, for all the earth is mine. I will count you a kingdom of priests, a consecrated nation. And so Yahweh promises a covenant here. I'm going to give you a covenant. But it's a conditional covenant. If you obey my voice and hold fast, not loosely hold my covenant, but hold fast my covenant. Then, that's a conditional covenant. If you do this, then I'll do that. Now again, we're going to see, we're not talking salvation. This is not a salvation issue. This is a discipleship issue. This is a possession issue. You shall be my own. You shall be a royal priesthood to me. You shall be a holy nation. By the way, if they don't hold fast, if they don't obey his voice, then in a sense, they're not his possession. He lets them free. Then they're not his royal priesthood. Then they're not a holy nation. Just because you are a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, just because you're a descendant of Judah or Levi or Aaron, if you believe and you hold fast, not to tradition, not to other things of man, but hold fast to my covenant, to Torah, then you are my possession, my royal priesthood, my holy nation. And we're going to see later on that this is open to whosoever will. We're going to see that this is open, that through Yeshua, and as proclaimed by Paul, by Peter, this is open to any Gentile that is cut off from the wild olive and is grafted into the cultivated olive tree of Israel. Then you become the possession of Adonai. You are my people. You are a royal priesthood. You are a holy nation. So that's available for Jew, Gentile, for Kol Israel, all of Israel. Again, but we have to hold on. And again, this is not a salvation issue. Salvation is always by grace through faith, has always been by grace through faith, and will always continue to be by grace through faith. But the Mosaic covenant was not a salvation covenant. It is not a salvation covenant. Always remember, the Mosaic covenant is not a salvation. It's about being the possession of Adonai, his royal priesthood, his holy nation. It's about Israel, the land, the geography of Israel. Now, he prepares the people here in verse 9. Yahweh said to Moses, I am coming to you in a dense cloud, so that the people may hear what I speak to you, and you and may trust you always. And Moses took the people's reply back to Yahweh. In fact, when you read, especially from verse 7, from verse 3, if you read from verse 3 to the rest of Exodus, right there, either put a little arrow or put Moses up, Moses down, Moses up, Moses down, Moses up, Moses down. Because he's going always up and he's always going down. Going talk to Adonai, then Adonai says this to the people answer him, then he goes back up. It's interesting that in verse 8, by the way, I missed that one. Then all the people answered as one, all that Yahweh has said we will do. And Moses took the people's reply to Yahweh. Now look at this. Adonai says, if you do this, then you will be my possession, my holy priesthood, my holy people, consecrated people. And Adonai tells them, are you going to do this? And then you'll do this. They said, yes, we will. And they signed on the dotted line. Look at this. They said, we will do all that Adonai says. They don't know what he's going to say. Can you imagine if I tell you, will you do everything I tell you? And you say, yes. Okay? I want you to go clean the yard. I want you to, well, wait a second. Whoa now. No one, please do not make contracts with people and have the lawyer say, can you sign your name and date it here at the bottom to a blank sheet of paper? How many of you would do that? A lawyer gives you a blank sheet of paper, underneath, sign and date, and then I'll fill in the rest. That's not good. Adonai says, will you do this? They said, yes, we will. And then he gives them the 10 words. But over here, what we have is he tells them, consecrate yourselves, wash your clothing, hold themselves in readiness for the third day. By the way, so many places in Scripture, it's on the third day, 3 days and 3 nights. Because on the third day, Yahweh will descend on the mountain of Sinai in the sight of the people. You will mark out the limits of the mountain and say, take care that nobody goes up the mountain. Touch the foot of it. Whoever touches the mountain will be put to death. Now, can you imagine the awesomeness, the holiness, the fear that Adonai put, that even if you go one step further here and you touch the foot of the mountain, you will die. And then no one must lay hand on him. He must be stoned or shot down by an arrow. Whether man or beast, he must not remain alive. When the ram's horn sounds, when the shofar sounds, a long blast, they are to go up the mountain. So Moses came down from the mountain to the people and bade them prepare themselves. And they washed their clothes. And he said to the people, be ready on the third day. Do not go near any women or your wives. Now at daybreak, verse 18, at daybreak, on the third day, there were peals of thunder on the mountain and lightning flashes, a dense cloud, and a large trumpet blast. And inside the camp, all the people trembled. Then Moses led the people out of the camp to meet Adonai, and they stood at the bottom of the mountain. And the mountain of Sinai was entirely wrapped in smoke, because Yahweh had descended on it in the form of fire. So here's where the theophany, the apparition on Sinai, as a form of fire. Remember, Yahweh appeared as a form of fire in the bush that didn't burn. It wasn't a fire of this world. It was a fire of Adonai, which didn't burn the tree, the presence of Adonai, his kavod. And it was what I call the pre-incarnate Yeshua. And the same thing here. He appeared as fire. The people, again, mark the limits. Go down, verse 14. Yahweh said to him, and come up again, bring Aaron with you, but do not allow the priests or the people to pass beyond their bounds to come up to Yahweh. So or he will break out against them. So Moses went up to the people and spoke to them. So Moses goes up, and then Moses comes down for the last time before the giving of the Decalogue. So lightning, thunder, Yahweh appears on the mount. Verse 1, then Yahweh spoke all these words, he said. Now, what's important is to know that Moses was not up the mountain when Adonai spoke. Moses was with the people at the foot of the mountain when Adonai spoke. And so the 10 words were given first audibly. It wasn't as Cecil B. DeMille in the 10 Commandments when Charlton Heston is up the mountain receiving the 10 Commandments on the 2 tablets of stone. That's the third time. The third time Adonai gave the 10 words. The first time he gave them audibly from the top to the people down. Then he said, Ani Yahweh, I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. And then what Adonai does is he gives what we call the Decalogue. The word Decalogue means the 10 words. In Hebrew, it is Asaret Chadevarim. Asaret Chadevarim, the 10 words, what we call the Decalogue. Now, the 10 words easily are, you shall have no other Elohim. You shall not make yourselves a carved image. You shall not misuse the name of Yahweh your Elohim. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false evidence against your neighbor. You shall not covet. Every one of us has broken these commandments. Every one of us. Thought, word, and deed. Thought, word, and or deed. These are the 10 words, the Asaret HaDevarim, that Adonai gave us. Now, this is a covenant. This is a covenant that Adonai gave us. And it's written in covenant form. There is a form called the Hittite Suzerainty Treaty. And suzerainty treaty, a suzerain, the king and the vassal. The king says, I will do this if you will do this. I will do this if you will do that. When you do this, I will do this. In this case, the king says, I am Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. So in other words, in this covenant, Adonai tells us what he has already done for us. Therefore, you as the vassal, you as the servant, this is what you will do for me. I give you this. This is what I want you to give me. I provide this. This is what I want you to provide for me. And whether it's political, educational, military, in this case, with a spiritual understanding, this is what we are to do. The 1 to 10 is our part in this. The 1, on Adonai's part, that's what he did. Think of it. We're redeemed. Can you imagine living in slavery all those years? Living in slavery. Slavery to Egyptians, slavery to the whip. But what are the slaveries that people live in today? The slavery of drugs, the slavery of alcohol, the slavery of immorality, all kinds of slaveries to money, slaveries to even our houses, slaveries to our pets. People are more slaves of their pets nowadays than at any time. And yet Adonai says, I will do this, you will do this for me. So in other words, with Yeshua has set us free. We're a redeemed people. The greatest gift in the world is that we have been redeemed of sin. Well, if we've been redeemed of sin, we've been delivered from the Pharaoh of Chasatan. We've been delivered from the furnace of the world. Now, shall we have other Elohim? Shall we make ourselves images other than him? Shall we misuse his name? Shall we forget his Sabbath? Shall we not honor our father and mother? Shall we murder? Shall we commit adultery? Shall we steal? Shall we lie? Shall we covet? No. No, he's done so much for us. The covenant is the response of a redeemed people. The covenant is not to redeem you. You're not redeemed if you don't have other Elohim. You're not redeemed if we follow that. No, it is faith in the Redeemer that saves us. It is by grace through faith in the Redeemer. Once you've been redeemed, this is how a redeemed person lives. Of course, there's the greatest command that people say, well, one of the scribes put a further question to Yeshua. Which is the first, or the word there is, which is the primary commandment? Which is the prime commandment? Which is the prime commandment? Yeshua replied, this is the prime, this is the first. Shema Yisrael, Yahweh our Elohim, Yahweh is one. And you must love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. The second is this, you must love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. Of all the commandments, the first commandment being, be fruitful and multiply. All the commandments that Adonai has given, the mishpatim, the chukim, the mitzvot, all the 10, these are the two commandments that are the most. Love Yahweh and love neighbor as ourselves. The sad thing is, most people that have come up with this and have used this, when you talk about the commandments or especially the Sabbath, well, they'll follow the other, but not the Sabbath. What we call the 9 suggestions. But one of the things is that they say, well, as long as I love Yahweh, or as long as I love God and love my neighbor, I'll give my shirt off. He gave his shirt off his back, and all this lovey-dovey stuff that they talk about. Well, I love my neighbor. I don't have to follow the Sabbath. I don't have to do that. As long as we love God and love our neighbor, that's all that matters. Because that's the greatest command. Of course it is. But what is the meaning of this? What does it mean to love Elohim? What does it mean to love your neighbor? The greatest commandment. Shema Yisrael, Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh Echad. Hear, O Israel, Yahweh our Elohim, Yahweh is one. And you shall love Yahweh your Elohim with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. That's where it comes from. Loving your neighbor comes from Leviticus 19:18. Love your neighbor as yourself. And so, this is the first and second commandment. There's nothing greater than these two. But how do we love Elohim? We love Elohim by having no other Elohim. We love Elohim, but not making carved images of him or of other Elohim. We love him by not misusing his name. We love him by remembering and keeping the Sabbath. We remember him by honoring our father and our mother. So 5 of the commandments teach us how to love Elohim. By the way, loving neighbor, the next 5 is we don't murder our neighbor. We don't commit adultery with our neighbor. We don't divorce and remarry. We don't steal. We don't lie. We don't covet what belongs to our neighbor. So if you say, as long as I love God and love my neighbor, I'm okay. What is loving Elohim? What is loving neighbor? And if you love Elohim and have other Elohim, other gods, other celebrities in your life, whether it's a football team or that movie star or that whatever, other Elohim, other idols. What are the idols in your life? Misusing the name, not having the right use of the name, not keeping the Sabbath, not honoring Father. You're not loving Elohim. By the way, who gave you your father? How many chose your father and your mother? None of us did. None of us chose our father and mother. Guess who chose our father and mother for us? Adonai. And Adonai doesn't make mistakes. There is no one that is a mistake. There's no such thing as illegitimate kids. There are illegitimate parents, though. Now, love of neighbor. How do I love my neighbor? I don't not just murder him, but as we're going to see, what we don't gossip about him. We don't. A lot of people say, "Well, I love my neighbor," but then you gossip about your neighbor, and what's that? You're killing him. Well, I don't commit adultery, but what did Yeshua say? If you divorce your wife and marry another, you've committed adultery. I don't steal. Well, the company has all kinds of paper clips. They're not going to miss a box of paper clips. You shall not give false witness. You shall not lie. This is about lying. Don't lie about your neighbor. Don't covet. Don't. I wish that. Because remember, if you wish so much you had his stuff, one of these days you're going to do something to get his stuff. So the real greatest commandments are the 10 commandments divided into loving Elohim and loving neighbor. And how we love Elohim and how we love our neighbor. And if you don't follow the 10 commandments, then you're not really loving Elohim and loving your neighbor. And again, I'm saying the 10 commandments because the 4th commandment in the love of Elohim and the 4th commandment of all of them is part of loving Elohim. You don't follow the Sabbath, you're not loving Elohim the way he tells you to. Oops. Of course, the Israel covenant, or what we call the Mosaic covenant, the Sinai covenant. What is Torah? A lot of people, here's where they get bogged down in the mud. The law. What is the law? Is Torah law? No. Torah is not law. Torah is instruction. In the instruction, there are laws, statutes. But again, it's interesting that a lot of people get bogged down on that and say, well, they're following Torah. I see so many times, just recently, one of you on a Tuesday night was showing a little video of a, I guess it was a pastor teaching against what we teach here, that we are Torah based, and they were showing us that here's a major pastor in the United States that is saying, oh, all those Torah keepers, they're back into the law. No, we're not. We're not back into the law. But it's interesting that people that say we're not under law, we're under grace, sometimes have congregational laws that are very much into legalism. You have to be baptized the right way. If you weren't baptized 3 times in the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, if you were not baptized in Jesus' name exactly, and you got to say Jesus. You can't say Yeshua, someone told me. You have to say Jesus. Well, that's legalism. They've fallen back and they're complaining to me. The idea of the Old Testament, the New Testament. There's no such thing as the Old Testament, no such thing as the New Testament. We have the Torah, the prophets, the writings that we call the Hebrew Scriptures, what Yeshua called the Scriptures, but Paul called the Scriptures. Every time the word Scriptures is found in the so-called New Testament, it's talking about the Old Testament. The Testament, the book, the scroll of the apostles was the Torah, not the Old Testament. They didn't follow the Old Testament. It wasn't old. And what we call the New Testament is actually the apostolic writings, the writings of the apostles. And so many times when we start talking, we'll talk about this more. We'll get more into this. And I was going to try to go through each one, but we have actually run out of time. And so one of the things that is really interesting is that if you see like each of the commandments, they're very small, very short. You shall have no other Elohim before my face. Boom, that's short. But when it talks about carved images, it's pretty big. When it talks about misusing the name, well, it's kind of middle. But when it talks about the Sabbath, did you know the Sabbath is the one with the most words in it? That's the heaviest of the commandments. Of course, honor your father. You shall not do murder. Again, it doesn't say you shall not kill, thou shalt not kill. It says you shall not murder. We are actually told to kill those who murder, which if you don't, the land is full of blood, and that's what's happening in America also. You shall not commit adultery. This is not just immorality, but this is divorce and remarriage. In the new covenant, adultery, divorce and remarriage is adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not give false evidence against your neighbor. You shall not set your heart on your neighbor's house and everything. Was the giving of the 10 words on Shavuot. The giving of the 10 words were spoken from the mountain audibly, number one. Next week, we're going to look at how they were written on a scroll by Moses. And then they were inscribed by Adonai in stone. Then they were inscribed by Adonai a second time. So there are 4 instances of giving of the 10 words spoken, written on a scroll by Moses, inscribed by Adonai 2 times. And that is our study for today. But in loving memory of my brother Tony, we are going to be doing a service, a memorial service and burial for Tony. The memorial service will be on Sunday, January 23rd at 6 p.m. at Olive Tree Congregation. And we're going to have a private tahara. By the way, one of the things that we practice in our congregation is tahara. Tahara, for those of you that are not familiar with the word, is the brothers that go home to be with Adonai and the sisters that go home to be with Adonai are prepared by brothers and prepared by sisters, and we wash the body, we anoint the body, and we wrap the body in linen, and then we casket the body in a wooden casket. Very simple and very biblical. And what was done to Yeshua, we do to our brothers and sisters that go home to be with Adonai. And so this is a private ceremony that is done before burial. And those of you that want to be part of the Tahara, please see me after service. And again, burial will be on Monday, January 24th at about 9:30, 10. And I put about 9:30, 10 because we'll do the Tahara at 8 o'clock, and whatever time it takes to do the ritual, Tahara ritual, and then come with the hearse and the body will be about 9:30, 10. And so keep that in mind. And again, that's at Arenal, 1 block west of Coors, behind Abundant Life Christian School. The cemetery is not part of the school, but there's a school right in front of where the cemetery is at. And then, again, depending on how long that takes, we're going to have an oneg, what is called a pot blessing, or in some churches, potluck. Will follow at about 12 noon because, again, I don't know how long it's going to take at the burial. And then, again, that's here at the congregation. And it's going to be open at 9 for food deliveries. Brother Steve, our receptionist, is going to be here in case anybody wants to bring flowers and bring food deliveries. And in lieu of flowers, when somebody puts in lieu of flowers, means instead of flowers, and the family requests donations be made to the Tony Otero Memorial Fund here at Olive Tree. We're going to have a box here. And a person that knew Tony had mentioned that they would like to give a donation to a memorial fund, and so they want to start a Tony Otero Memorial Fund, and I don't know what they want to do with the funds. We'll see what they want to do with the funds. But if anybody wants to, instead of flowers, always remember in Israel, if you go to Israel, there's always signs for tourists and Gentiles. Do not pick the flowers. Because in Israel, they have this idea that you shouldn't cut flowers. You should see them as beautiful as they are. And so they give pots of flowers. By the way, if somebody does give you flowers, don't just say thank you and take them. Don't make it a big thing. But it's just that's the way they do things in Israel. And so in lieu of flowers, a donation is made. And in some cases, a donation is made. You've probably seen that to the Heart Hospital or to the Cancer Society or something like that. So we're going to start this Tony Otero Memorial Fund here at Olive Tree. Those of you that you heard me say that the Hada ritual, this is the coffin. Coffins are made here in-house by Richard Chavez, that is sitting right in front of me. And so these are a couple of his caskets. If anybody is in need of a casket, they are $700 in case anybody needs one. And we do the tahada, the ritual washing, anointing, the shrouding of the body, and putting them in a very simple pine coffin. A lot of people always say, oh, I just want to be buried in a pine coffin. But then they buy these $5,000, $8,000 caskets that are hermetically sealed with a nice little pillow. And, of course, that's not using our finances wisely. Also, this is a year from this is my Hebrew professor. He died last year at this time, and so it's interesting that this was in the last year's teaching, and so it comes up, and so this is my Hebrew professor at the Light and Powerhouse with Hal Lindsey and Bill Counts, and he was my Hebrew professor and taught Old Testament and a couple of other classes. And so today is his 1 year Yatzrit anniversary of his going home. And again, I want to thank every one of you that has given online. And of course, it's olivetreefellowship.com. You could give online. And I want to thank you, especially at this time. It is hard for a lot of things are going on, but I thank you because without your giving, there's no way we could go on here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I want to thank and continue. Just be blessed. Let's go ahead and stand. Father, I thank you for the opportunity that we have to at least throw some information out that everyone here could go back and study to see if these things be so, but study more, Father, and that you could raise up teachers from this place that will go on and teach others who will be able to also teach others, and what discipleship is all about. Yevarechecha Yahweh va'ishmerecha, Ayid Yahweh panav elecha v'chunecha, Asa Yahweh panav elecha v'yasem lecha. Shalom. May Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May Yahweh lift up the light of his countenance upon you and give you his peace. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day. Shalom, shalom. Welcome to Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries. Thank you for joining us on our channel. If you have enjoyed this teaching and would like to see more, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the notification bell so that you can be notified when we have new videos. If you would like to support Olive Tree Fellowship and Torah Unleashed Ministries, please visit us at olivetreefellowship.com or TorahUnleashed.org. We thank you for your past support and hope to continue with you. Shalom, shalom. Have a good day. Shalom, shalom y bienvenidos a Olive Tree y a la Torah desatada. Les doy gracias a ustedes y a Adonai por su apoyo que nos han dado aquí. Y si quieren continuar a hacer una donación, pueden ir aquí en TorahUnleashed.org o en olivetreefellowship.com y ahí pueden dar una donación. Su apoyo, su ayuda es importante en estos días. Shalom, shalom.